Hey folks, Coach Patrick here, back with another episode talking about heat management and training and racing. And today's topic is going to be a little unique, and we're going to talk about a constraint. You've heard me say this before. I've never met a constraint I didn't like. When someone takes away an element of training or an element of racing or a piece of equipment or a training opportunity, things get simpler. We get to reduce them to the most absolute baseline. And that's a great place for us to start as athletes, whether we're experienced or we're beginners. Having a better comprehensive understanding of the fundamentals allows us to become better at not only managing them, but then using them as a foundation upon which we can build greater skills. In the case of pacing and racing in the heat, it's really important that we get to understand what your capacity is for managing the heat. And the best way to do this is through our training. So when we're out training and doing maybe shorter races or just, going after some Strava segments, et cetera, you'll see a variety of heart rate numbers and you'll have a variety of different heart rate experiences. Even if we're not really focusing on the effort side, if we're just looking at the time of year, you'll find that, say, when we make that initial transition from spring to summer, things are really challenging. Heart rate seems worse. The intensity, the RPE seems off the charts. You're not going very fast, but by the effort in terms of your internal metrics, you'd say that you're going as fast as the fastest human alive. And that's simply because you're not adapted to the conditions. You're feeling that stress, etc. So what do we do once we've done our training, we've done our hard work, and we're getting into a situation where we're either doing like a race simulation workout, we're getting into a race? How can we start to use heart rate effectively as a tool to make sure that we're doing the right thing on race day? And that's where we introduce the concept of a heart rate cap. A heart rate cap is essentially a ceiling upon your effort that allows us to make sure that we aren't over-exceeding ourselves, over-exerting ourselves in a situation that will lead to further detrimental problems down the line. The longer your event and the more of your event that exists in the time frame of the day that has those higher temperatures, whether they're absolute higher temperatures or just pretty high temperature and very high humidity as well, that dew point actually becomes very, very important and makes that heat costly, right? Makes the hot feel hotter. Then the better off you can be about managing your effort across the day. So those long races, those long efforts, they really require that perspective where you can distribute your effort in such a way where you can be successful. And a cap allows you to do just that. So why do we use a cap? Well, first and foremost, only because usually people bring a lot of a complexity to the race situation. They've got ideas about downhill speed. They've got ideas about uphill speed. Whether or not they've been on this course or this terrain before, as humans, we naturally draw comparisons and say, that thing is just like this other thing that I did. It's going to look like X, Y, and Z. It's not going to look anything like X, Y, and Z. But that's what we tell ourselves as we sort of prepare for the event, is trying to take the unknown, what's going to happen on race day, and bring it inside and say, okay, I got this, because it's probably going to look like that. Since it's going to look like that, then I'll be good. And it sounds weird when I say that, because of course, part of your brain is going right now, that doesn't make any sense. You haven't done it yet. You haven't done these conditions. How could you know? But as humans, we do it all the time. We have expectations of what's going to happen. We base it off of our past experience, or we base it off of the limited knowledge that we have. But just as humans, we're really good at sort of extrapolating it out into bigger pieces. And there's a lot of responsibility that comes to that when we think about a race perspective. Whether or not you're racing to win the thing or earn salary or pay the mortgage, or if you're just going out there to have a great day and finish, messing up that intensity equation can have dramatically poor outcomes for your race performance. Simply because when we start talking about the heat and the conditions associated with it, even a small crack can quickly escalate into something that's very hard to get back out of, because the heat itself does accumulate. It does stick with your body. So when we think about how we're going to manage our heat, when we think about this heart rate cap, essentially what we're doing is we're saying, beyond this effort level, I'm going to back things down. So let's say we're out for a run. We're doing our easy 5-mile loop around the neighborhood and normally see a heart rate number of 135, just easy jogging zone 135. As you start to pick things up, you know that heart rate will go higher, but our goal is to keep it steady. So we've got to be really smart with our effort totally over time. And we have a cap for that. So let's just say, with the range being what it is, we say the high end is 139, the low end is 131. So you've got like an 8-watt window, 135 smack in the middle. You can go a little bit lower if you need to back off a bit. You can go a little bit harder if you need to pick it up a bit. But in general, our average should fall inside that space. This becomes a great space for you to operate inside of, because now you've got guardrails to say, oh, if I hit this number, I've got to slowly take things back. I don't want to exceed that number. Similarly, if you hit the low end number and you say, oh, I must really be backing off really far, unless it's a dangerous or technical session, or you're making the strategic decision to recover, then you're also leaving time on the table with your race. And nobody wants to do that either. So when we think about using this heart rate cap, how does it effectively work on the day? Well, number one, let's not forget that it's based off of your training. So we've got real data, contextually, hopefully even connected to the weather, that allows us to make a better set of decisions about how to sort of lay out your effort and pace yourself across your entire event day. Now, from the second piece of that, we have a range that we develop with a high and a low. So we say the cap for your heart rate on the bike, let's say non-weight bearing, low relative heart rate, good in shape person, fit and rested. Let's say your normal heart rate might be, 140 on a ride. Let's just call you 135 right now. Let's say 135 is how we're going to be. Let's run with 135. So you go out and ride, and you ride your race and your watts and everything else, and you ride those numbers, but you're just every once in a while looking at the heart rate. And you'll see that heart rate over time start to tick, 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 tick up till it gets into that 130 range. Then we've got that buffer up and down sort of around those numbers. So sorry, 140 range. And with that in mind, then we know, hey, if I'm on a hill, I'm okay seeing a few more dots. Or if I'm on a downhill, I'm okay seeing a few less dots. But if you start to see that even though you're on the flats, that heart rate number is going up, then we know you're putting yourself into a real tough spot, because we are using that heart rate as a cap to prevent us from overreaching and putting us in a position where the end of our race becomes exponentially hard. And that's mostly due to the fact that people simply do a poor job pacing. And rather than getting into the weeds and saying, do this on this hill or do that on that hill, or etc., we can simply say, let's just cap that heart rate at a specific space and make sure you're in a good spot. And the reason why this works in endurance events is because people accumulate heat. As large organisms, we pull in the heat and we'll retain it often for quite some time. If you've ever sunburned yourself or had a sunburned kid, you know how warm the skin can be hours and hours, even days later. And that's just simply because that person sort of has accumulated all of that heat from the direct sunlight and the self-care steps that they've taken. Super not good for your body or your skin. So we want to avoid that as much as all possible. But the broader point here is that the cap then effectively prevents you. So if you know you've got a cap on that heart rate that's 145, as your heart rate gets up to 145, you've got a decision to make. You got to say, I've got to do something that's going to get that heart rate down. Maybe I'll make it that downhill, I'll get to recover. Or maybe you say, this is a tough spot, I'm just going to start walking right now and just drop it back and let the race kind of open up a little bit, so you're not jammed up or racing to other people's expectations, which I think can be really challenging, right? Another reason why the heart rate cap works is that it also prevents lulls. So it's very easy on harder days to find those easy sections, the downhill sections or the downhill with the tailwind, and almost milk them, almost make them a little easier so you can recover on the harder sections. But that's free time as well. So we always want to have sort of the more steadier race as possible, with the idea of saying at the end, we've always got enough energy left to finish strong or close things out, and so on. And so when we think about this from a high-low perspective in terms of heart rate, you'll have a space below which, say it's 140 is that average heart rate, 144 is okay to add the letters and kind of take care of what that means at the higher level. On the lower level, when we start thinking about what does that mean, it's like, oh, I've really dropped things down. I'm underperforming right now. And that's also just as equally dangerous from a performance perspective, because as those numbers start to drop, it's really hard to grab that wheel and turn this gigantic ship back around again to start bringing those numbers up moving forward. That's where pacing and nutrition play an important role. Okay. By having a heart rate cap, it allows you to avoid any spikes in power and keeps you really steady. It allows you to go ahead and use any other metric you want. As long as you have heart rate on the dial, you can use any other metric for your effort. And in fact, you can go back afterwards and look at it in your training log for your athletes or for yourself and see what the effort looked like in the real world, and then what the workout itself looked like. How closely do they map or marriage? That will be super important as well. Okay. Let's see here. Last piece that I want to talk about in terms of capping effort, which I think is important, is understanding that there is a distinct line between power and heart rate. Power is a direct number as a result of your muscles. Heart rate is simply a result of the work your entire body's doing. So when I think about capping with a heart rate, what do we do about these other numbers? What do we do about power and pace? How do we manage that? For me, I still take those numbers, but I've got that heart rate number in the background. So I'll ride my power pace plan. But as my heart rate starts to inch up across the day, unless I can be smart about it or sense a downhill or something's going to change technology-wise, I can look at that and say, this is going to be a super challenge for folks. This is something you have to be really careful about. It allows you to say, how do I know that I'm being my personal best? And you can know that you're being your personal best when you understand that the total ramifications of the effort that you're pushing. Even if you feel good on the run, even if you're just in a great spot on the bike, or you're just really amped up, you're super excited, just high five to your family, everything's good, you want to get after and crush it. The big picture perspective of having that heart rate number on the wrist becomes critical, because it allows you to make sure that you're not making rash decisions. You're actually, sort of maintaining the trail, helping to reinforce it, and keeping everyone healthy and safe through your measured and consistent actions. So as you think about using heart rate for your race and training season in the heat, I do recommend that you establish a cap. You don't exceed that cap unless you're in special training, special times of day where things are cooler or you've got a good setup, and especially on race day where things will just get hard enough on their own. And that last mile of the Coeur d'Alene course or whatever race you're doing will feel super challenging, even though any other day it might not seem so bad. All right. Best of luck to you, everyone out there who's racing soon in this hot, hot weather. Excited to see how things play out for you. If you've got questions or comments, hit me up at endurancenation.us using the red chat button icon at the bottom. Those of you on the team, go ahead and check us out online. We're just sort of, hanging out and getting stuff done. Again, you can find us in the DMs on any one of our community platforms. Thanks, folks. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.